All these brown people, and we get started on time here.
Yo, tell me about no. I didn't know this. Tell me.
Yeah, the brown people is colored people's time. Colored people.
Yeah. Joyal just switched out one brown person for me. That's all it was, right? She went from working with Hassan Minaj to me, but the timing still stays the same. So we've got the Desi Standard Time, DST.
Yes.
I didn't know anything about that.
Anywhere from 30 to 2 hours late, depending on the wedding venue.
Ooh, hey, we got having a lot of people at the weddings.
Here's what's happening. What I'm hearing when I hear this is that we are all right. If we're the majority of people, like we gotta, as a world, stop trying to be on white people time. Maybe their time is being on. Like everybody's like, oh, we're late. It's like, no, maybe y'all just early. Y'all always been early.
We should label them white people time instead of calling ours colored people in this. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Y'all white people time, WP.
I like it.
Yeah.
WPT.
I am here for it.
A nice side of racism. Here we go.
Hey, Bolavi, how are you?
Hello.
We're just talking about Desi Standard Time.
I was trying to understand.
I'm 1 minute late.
No,
we wasn't even.
No, do not feel ashamed about it. That was the point. We are no longer going to feel bad about colored people's time because there are more colored people than there are anybody else. So,
yes, global majority.
As Mindy Kaling puts it, it's caramel princess time.
Even better.
Oh, I had never heard of that.
Even better.
Okay.
And as
it's
Danny
not a thing,
Lee
it's what I tell
it,
myself to make myself feel better. But yeah.
Yes.
I like it.
As Danny Lee puts it, yellow bone. I don't know if you guys saw that controversy today, but it was super duper fun.
I did not.
I
love controversy.
Let's get this popping.
Let's get it popping. First of all, hello.
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
I'm David.
Hi, I'm Joyelle.
Appreciate y'all hopping on and participating.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Love your name, David. Just
yeah, my name. Listen, it's been rough last few years, but I'm very excited to be the only one that matters now. So feel very good about that going forward. My DMs aren't as crazy as they have been.
Oh God, I can't imagine.
Yeah, of the mail. My sister got a letter in the mail. She sent me a picture of those campaigns that they like. I think the awesome people said it was like David Perdue is not for you, and they personalize it. So it was like Kristen Perdue. Did you know David Perdue is not for you? And it's just like my name and the reasons why I'm not for it. And I was just like, I'll save that. We have to frame that. Like that's just fun.
I will never have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Quite blessed. Quite blessed.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Maybe one day. You never know. We did have Bobby Jindal.
No, but no one named Pallavi Parkais says I'm going to run for office because I'm pretty much the only one.
Yeah, there you go. Well, whenever you run, we will have you back. All right, we'll do a short official intro and then get you all started here. So hello and welcome to the Confused Podcast. We are your host. My name is Munir McJohnny.
My name is Joyelle Nicole Johnson.
And I'm David Perdue.
And I am so excited for our first two guests, our guinea pigs for this show. Two people who I have looked up to, learned from a lot in the past couple of years. Bolavi Parkaista and Falak Sabak, both who have extensive experience in the Georgia legislators, in Georgia politics, helping move Georgia forward. And I'm so excited to have both of them here and learn from both of them. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So one question that I've got to ask right off the back, being Asian, being people of color, being females, ending up in this space, having the impact that you had in there, what led you to this?
It's a good question. Pallavi, you go first and then I'll.
So it's funny you mentioned Bobby Jindal because it's kind of on him. He gave some kind of interview, I think it was in 2014, where he said that if you consider yourself a hyphenated American, you're not a real patriot. A few ground rules. Am I allowed to cuss on this?
Yes, please.
Okay. So that was kind of bullshit, right? And because that was the time where I was finally learning to be proud of being Indian American, because moved here from India in 8th grade, and being an immigrant whose parents won't let you shave your legs and you kind of got that weird accent, middle school and high school, it was kind of hard, and I was kind of pulling away from my identity because I thought assimilating was kind of the cool thing to do. So that was the time I was finally learning to be proud of my culture and proud of my roots. So hearing him say that was just kind of like, oh, now screw you. And in response, I went and started volunteering for Michelle Nunn's campaign. And that was really my first, venture into political world, especially because I had gotten naturalized the year before. And then the campaign bug caught me. I ended up, after she lost, I ended up joining the Democratic Party of Georgia, doing some voter outreach for them. While I was knocking on doors, one day I knocked on the door of somebody who was running for office, started volunteering for him, and then things just kind of like snowballed from there. So I worked on campaigns, worked at the Capitol with Val, and yeah, it's just been a great process, but it's nothing that I went to school for. It's nothing that I kind of saw myself doing. It was just one thing led to another, and I just really capitalized on some of the opportunities that came my way.
So this is a learning podcast, and we take breaks when we don't understand something. You said you got naturalized. Joyelle or David, do you know what that means?
I have an idea.
Know what naturalization is.
Yeah.
You had to take an immigration citizenship test, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I used to be a substitute teacher in South Central Los Angeles, right? And they would throw me into just like the wolves. I had a bachelor's degree in communications. I didn't know how to deal with these kids. So one of the things I used to do was give them the citizenship test, because I know that most Americans don't even know how to pass the citizenship test, ironically enough.
It wasn't an easy test. Like, it wasn't just like how many stars are on the flag. It was, name 5 cabinet positions, which I think most Americans wouldn't be able to do.
Right.
But yeah, it came here, moved here from India. When I became an American citizen, I had to renounce my Indian citizenship. And the process is, and I hear people say, like, why can't you just become a citizen? Like, it's a long process and it's an expensive process. And you have to study for the test. So yeah, it was
what a bold thing for America to make people do, is if we do any of that. So what a bold move.
And then you call it naturalization. I'd forgotten that that's what you call it. It's just such a weird thing to call it that you got naturalized, right? But that's the term that they use for it.
Yeah, I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
That is weird.
So wild. So Falak, tell us a little bit about your journey of ending up here.
So I started off, I actually got inspired by President Obama when he was running in 2008. He was just charismatic, talking all the right things I wanted to hear. And, I come from a Arab American family. I was born and raised here. So politics was always something natural discourse. And so, we had always talked about foreign policy. That was really what we kind of grew up with. And then as I kind of started plugging in, hearing what President Obama was campaigning on, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is neat. And so the bug kind of bit me. I needed an internship. I was about to graduate from UGA and was like, oh, people need internships to get jobs. That's like a thing. And so like I called the Democratic Party of Georgia and was just like, hey, like I saw y'all had an internship. I'm interested. And so they accepted me. I worked that summer and then I went back to Athens for my final semester. But during that time, there was like it was the 2010 coordinated campaign was going on. Governor Barnes was on the ticket and people were running statewide. And I started volunteering up in Athens. And it just kind of from there kind of went on. I started working at the General Assembly in 2011 and had been on the staff side position up until this past November. So it just kind of got bit by the bug and just kind of stayed in there one opportunity after another. And it's just been a hell of a ride. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, the goal of this podcast is really like the adult version of Schoolhouse Rock, right? Remembering things that we may have forgotten or learning things that we may have never been taught before. So to kind of do the high level breakdown, in the United States, you've got the 3 big branches of government. You've got the judicial, which has the Supreme Court and other federal courts. You've got the executive, which has the president, the vice president, their cabinets. And then you've got the legislative, and that's kind of what we want to focus on today. So at the national level, you've got U.S. Congress, U.S. senators, and U.S. House of Representatives. And then you have a similar mirroring of that in Georgia, which can be called, the session, the Georgia General Assembly, Georgia state senators or Georgia state representatives. Break that down for us a little bit. What is the power that they have? What do they do there? Why is it called Under the Gold Dome? Because I keep calling it the Golden Dome, and Balavi keeps getting mad at me for that. What is the secret behind this thing?
Well, there's a lot of secrets. So it kind of does mirror the federal approach, where you do have the three-pronged kind of system. You have the Supreme Court of Georgia, you have the legislative branch that breaks down to the House and the Senate, and then you have the governor's office, which is the executive. And so, you know, you watch during the legislative session, which starts the second Monday of every January, you kind of watch them pass legislation in terms of like the budget, which is the number one and only constitutionally mandated thing that the legislature has to do. And that's basically the purse string, right? What gets funded, what doesn't get funded. I mean, it could be from anything from education to agricultural programs to prison programs to everything and anything that needs money comes through the budget. And then they pass like other bills, you know, during the 40-day period that's allotted. And I mean, it just ranges from election law to, you know, alcohol laws to, I mean, anything and everything under the sun. But it doesn't go to the depth of, let's say, like streets and like trash collection. That kind of breaks down onto the municipal level. Now, all those people work together, but the legislature really does kind of have the overbroad for the state. And I don't know if I'm missing anything, Pallavi.
I mean, it's a really broad question, right? So the way it's kind of designed is you have 180 representatives, 56 senators. Every voter in Georgia, actually every non-voter, every person in Georgia has a representative as well as a senator, depending on which district they live in. I think some of the major differences between the federal level and the state level, both chambers of the House, you hold a term for two years, whereas, you know, U.S. Senate, once you're elected, you're in there for 6. It's just a lot to cover. So, you know, you have your bills that, exactly what Val said, you know, these are the statewide bills that deal with any kind of budgeting or any laws. And there are 40 non-consecutive days that are allotted, which is called session, any one legislative session. And I think, I've forgotten this, day 30 is crossover.
They actually just changed it. I think it's day 28 in the House, but they might have changed it again this year. I'm not. It's like a housekeeping rule that they do. The House and the Senate leadership kind of go back and forth, and they can change, you know, those little nuances.
So sometime like a little past halfway through is what's called crossover, which means any bill that doesn't go from the House to the Senate or doesn't go from the Senate to the House is dead. So any bill that doesn't cross over is dead. And that means they can play games with these things, right? So if there is a bill that passes the House, but is super controversial, and the lieutenant governor, who is president of the Senate, wants to hold it up, all that person has to do is not bring that bill to a vote. And once crossover day is done, that bill is dead. That's just an automatic rule. And then the last day of session, which a lot of people you'll see on your news feeds, if you have a lot of political friends, it's called sine die. Any bill that doesn't pass that day, dead. So that is another major difference, right, between the federal and the state, is the federal goes on throughout the year, whereas the state usually at sometime end of March, early April. So it's definitely a very loaded question, and there's a lot of stuff.
No, that was perfect. Y'all nailed it. So for this year, I know it's from July 11th till April 2nd, 40 days spread out through that. In terms of the representatives, so you said there's 180 state representatives and then 56 senators, right? How are those decided? Like, is that done through how many counties and how many people we have, or is it similar to, you know, the U.S. Senate? How is that decided?
So that's a really interesting question to have to bring up this year, because that is determined through the census, but the party in power gets to draw the districts, which is not a great thing, because on both sides we've seen, you know, when Democrats have control, they kind of tend to draw the lines in a way that benefits them, and the Republicans sure as hell have done that. So it's important, you know, a lot of people have been talking about redistricting reform and making it nonpartisan. That is an important piece of it, but it is the party in power that draws lines every 10 years based on the census.
Got it.
Okay, my question for both of you ladies. So speaking about redistricting and things like that, what are the things in Georgia, like the top, I don't know, 3 things that you want to see change on this session? Like, what are your things that you're like holding on to that you want to get past? Or
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, because the Democrats are in the minority in both chambers, a lot of it is like, we wish that bad bills won't pass.
Right.
So like, one is like, I hope that they don't get rid of absentee or no excuse absentee ballot voting. We've kind of heard split opinions from the Republicans. Some of them are against it, some of it are for it. That's going to be a pretty big push this year. I really hope that they don't mess a lot with the election laws.
Do those bills have a name yet? Because, like, I remember in New York, it was like, you have to say no to this one, or you have to say yes to it. And you specifically have to know the wording because they mess you up in the wording as well, right?
I think it depends. Certain like bills have like the so-and-so act and they give them like little cute names, but a lot of the vast majority of the Georgia bills, it's just like House bill number and then House resolution number. So I don't think that they've dropped any legislation yet. But they did just form a special committee to take a look at our current election laws. That committee alone, usually those kind of laws go through the Governmental Affairs Committee. The speaker took it upon, himself to create a new committee to explore and figure out, what's going on with our election system. Do changes need to be made, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be one thing to watch. I personally do not want them to get rid of no excuse absentee ballot. We saw how helpful and useful that was during a pandemic where people didn't feel safe going out to their polling locations. And we saw maximum turnout. We've seen turnout like we've never seen before. And then, we won pretty big and the country won. So that's one of the things I think I'm looking at.
What is the speaker's role?
So the speaker is like how the Senate has the lieutenant governor, who's the president of the Senate. That's how the speaker is in the House. So he is elected from the 180 members. So he himself is a member and has his own district to represent. He is elected from that complete 180 member body to be the speaker. So the speaker, he kind of runs the day. He gavels in, gavels out. He has immense power. He gets to assign committees. He gets to assign committee chairmen. He even gets to assign offices, House, like where you sit on the House floor.
Oh, wow.
So he is an incredibly powerful individual. The office is a bipartisan one. You see, Democrats and Republicans voting for that position.
Got it. Interesting. Okay.
And I think for me, the number one legislation I'm looking at is Medicaid expansion. It's something that we've been talking about. Really, I remember that 3 years I spent at the Capitol, we were talking about it. And we see it kind of having bipartisan support among people. But I feel like for a lot of the Republicans who are elected, they agree with it, but they're too scared to touch it because they don't want to get primaried and then lose their seat. But I think this pandemic has kind of really shown us just how bad our healthcare sucks. And this whole idea of paying into Medicaid and letting it like sit in Washington or go to one of the states that accepts Medicaid instead of bringing it back to us and, screwing over our rural hospitals in the process. I don't see any good argument to not do it. So I'm hoping that's something that we can kind of, Republicans, if they need to like hold their nose and vote for it, I'm fine with that. I think that's something that really needs to happen soon.
I like those answers.
So David, go on. Sorry, go on.
No, go.
I was going to say, you talked about getting primaried and losing their seat. Expand on that a little bit more.
So the election process is, when you have these districts, a state Senate district or a state House district, these are partisan races. So you'll have every 2 years a primary sometime in May where it's like if you think about it in football terms, it's like a little what do you call it?
Scrimmage.
What's the word? Intramurals.
Okay.
And then the winner, whoever wins the Democratic primary will go up against whoever wins the Republican primary. So this kind of goes back to our little redistricting conversation. Some of our seats are so gerrymandered, which means it's drawn in a way to benefit one party. So they'll make sure when they're drawing it that it has 56% Republican, so that, you know, they have like that slight majority where they're safe. But at the same time, that means that, you know, close to 50% people are now going to get the representation they want, but it's drawn in such a way that it benefits one party, which ends up meaning that for a lot of these places, like you take Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a congresswoman from Georgia.
How dare you say that name on our podcast?
If you look at the map, it's kind of, you know, you understand that it's gerrymandered in such a way that she was always, whoever won the Republican primary was going to win the general, because no Democrat has a shot in a district like that. But that also means that if people don't show up to the primary and they're not voting for the most extreme person, then that person of the population that showed up to that person, that party's primary, that entire batch of people decided what the entire Congress and the entire district was going to be represented by. What was the original question? I said Marjorie Taylor Greene.
No, you're fine. Yeah, getting primary.
Blacked out.
Yeah.
We all do. We heard her name.
Right.
Yeah.
But getting primary just means that, you know, once you're in office, there's no guarantee you're going to hold it in 2 years. Getting primary means somebody in your own party decides you're not good enough for whatever reason. And to some extent, you know, depending on the kind of district you represent, that's more dangerous. So you hear a lot of talk about Brian Kemp getting primaried or Raffensperger getting primaried. That's because there are Republicans who are upset at them for not breaking the law and landing their asses in jail, who want to now say, well, we want a different Republican to be in charge of this. Did I explain that right, Val?
Yes, you did.
It makes sense to me, so you explained it right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Val, you worked on, you know, as the executive assistant, not only for Stacey Abrams, which we need to talk about, but you also were, you know, the immediate past executive director for the Democratic leader, right? Tell us about that structure. So I know we've got a bunch of caucuses. Can you tell us, A, what a caucus is, how that structure is, and kind of that back end world that you saw in your role as well?
Yeah, of course. So the caucuses, basically, it's like a group within the House chamber that, I mean, for us, it was the Democratic caucus. So all the people who were affiliated with the Democrats, we were a caucus. So basically, this group kind of comes together, sticks together on certain issues. You know, if there was, you know, the RFRA bill, which is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is a bill that would have allowed businesses to discriminate against the LGBTQ plus community. You know, that would have, you know, we came together and said, no, as Democrats, we don't agree with this. We're going to stand against this. And so, you know, that's kind of like a caucus. You kind of, you know, you come together based on, you know, your ideology. Now, that doesn't mean that we agreed all the time, but, you know, as the Democrats in the House, we stuck together, we met with each other, talked about the issues, talked about what was important, and, you know, figured out what we needed to do to move certain issues forward or defend from certain issues. So Munir, as you said, like when I started working on the House side, I was the executive assistant to the minority leader at the time, who was Stacey Abrams. I was in that position for 6 years. And so, you know, so in that position, you know, not only was I responsible for managing her schedule, you know, being the face of the office, making sure I was fielding calls from constituents, lobbyists, you know, everybody and anybody under the sun. You know, I was also in a good position to watch members and make sure that they had what they needed, that they were okay, that, you know, if they needed to get something, I would direct them to the right staff member, et cetera, et cetera. And then after I graduated, I went to law school at the same time as working, you know, in that position. After I graduated, the new minority leader, who is Bob Trammell, he asked me to stay on as executive director. You know, I had been there for 6 years previous, so, you know, I knew the members very well. And then through there, I kind of flipped over from the staff, you know, state staff side to the campaign side. And so basically when I started, a lot of the responsibility was, one, continuing making sure members had what they needed, you know, making sure that they had all the information they needed and wanted. But the larger goal for me at that point was to add as many seats as possible into our numbers. So when I started, we had 62 Democrats in a chamber of 180. And then now we have 77.
Wow.
You better work.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And I mean, it makes a big difference because when I first started, in 2011, we had 63 members. Then redistricting happened, and then the Republicans knocked us down to 60, which I mean was effectively, they could pretty much pass constitutional amendments, which means that they need 2/3 of the body's vote without having a single Democrat. And so now, when you're at a posture where you're at 75, 77, you have more leverage. At a certain point, the Republicans do need to come to the Democrats, talk to them about because what's happening, what Pallavi was saying in terms of the primaries is that, you're starting to kind of see, they're not able to get all Republicans to fall in line. So if they need to reach majority, they need to come talk to the Democrats. So it is a lot of coalition building. It is a lot of conversations. Having more Democrats helps in terms of getting a little bit more leverage in those conversations. So that was, a big role, was to make sure that we added as many seats as we could, recruited enough candidates, because what we were finding was a lot of these districts, especially in the suburban areas, had not been challenged by Democrat in Pallavi, 15. And so, the numbers that we had been looking at, were totally inaccurate because we just hadn't had anybody run for so long. And that's why we saw the gains that we saw in 2018.
There is something that Val mentioned that I want to draw a distinction towards. A bill that would be, kind of like an abortion ban bill, that just needs a majority to pass. A bill that's a constitutional amendment, for example, if we wanted to change the Georgia code to reflect that marriage can only be considered a marriage if it's between a man and a woman, that would need 2/3 of the vote. So up until 2017, was it 2017 though? Yeah, when Taylor
Bennett was elected.
Up until 2017, Republicans had a super majority, not just a majority in the House, which means that they had that 2/3 of the vote where they could change our constitution without a single Democrat voting yes on it. When we broke that in 2017, that was a huge deal because now it meant that they would have to get Democratic votes to change the Georgia Constitution. It's the same thing on the Senate side. We broke the supermajority, I think, at the same time. So we weren't just minority, we were super minority to the part that we were sometimes maybe there for show. So that is a distinction to make, that, if it's a constitutional amendment, requires more votes. And this is where, even though we are a minority, it matters because that means that they cannot change our constitution without getting a good amount of Democrats on board with that.
How does an abortion ban, how does that start? So if someone wants to do an abortion ban, where does that start and who brings that to the legislator and gets them to vote on it? It starts in the House, or explain that process to me.
The last major one started in the House. I don't know if the Senate had a similar bill to that, but it's the way any other bill would start in the House. You'll have a sponsor, you'll have the bill written. Once you file the bill, it's called dropping a bill. And then the speaker will assign it to a committee. If it gets voted out of the committee, then it comes to the floor, and then members vote on it. And this kind of goes back to a little bit, we were talking about naming of the bills. The people writing it kind of name it. So the abortion ban bill, we call it an abortion ban bill. That wasn't the name, it was called the fetal heartbeat bill. And what Val said about RFRA, the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act, we didn't come up with that name, they did. So the cutesy names are usually given by the people writing it, and then the people who are against it will call it the abortion ban bill because that's what it was.
Yeah.
Get the keywords out there. I had a quick question, and this more has to do with kind of where we find ourselves today. I know, Falik, you mentioned that you work with Stacey Abrams, and right now she's getting a lot of attention, rightfully so, for all of her work that she's done literally once her election was taken from her. Right. And so I like to consider myself in this podcast as the everyman. Like, I literally know the least I would venture to say of anyone about anything in politics. So I'll just say, like, a lot of the thing that I appreciated the most about this whole Stacey Abrams thing was the fact that It is very clear that she did not take votes for granted. Like in the sense that like it feels like a lot of politicians, it feels like they're doing their homework very last minute. It's like, oh, it's not, like, as someone who did his homework last minute, his entire career in school, like college and high school, like I know what it feels like when you're like, oh dang, I forgot this is important and I should do this, but I didn't do a rough draft. I didn't do, like all the stuff that you're supposed to do to make a good presentation. I didn't do that. And so I guess what I'm saying is because I think for all of us, the purpose of this podcast was to again try to keep momentum going, right? For people to stay engaged. So what do you see, both of you? What do you both see as ways that like regular everyday people or even politicians, like, because I realize now it's a two-way street, but what does it look like going forward to maintain momentum and also just get people engaged so that we don't have these hiccups that we continue to have with politicians and citizens that we've always had for long? What do you both see as far as that's concerned?
The one correction I would like to make is it wasn't Stacey Abrams didn't wait until she lost to get the work started.
That's true. That is very true.
That is very true. She started New Georgia Project a while ago, and she's been working on it. So everything that happened in November and what happened on January 5th, it's been a culmination of her work for over a decade. I did want to clarify that.
No, you're right. Thank you.
The other thing, I think in terms of how to get people involved, I've worked a lot in the northern suburbs of Atlanta where there's a decent amount of naturalized citizens like me. So for my parents, and I tell the story a lot, when I'm on a panel and somebody else gets asked, like, how did you get started? They'll have a story about how they voted with their grandparents or they went canvassing with their parents. And my experience was the complete opposite. I had to learn it and then I had to teach it to my parents, right? Because they didn't know exactly the questions you guys are asking, like, what is a primary? Why do I have to vote 5 times in 2020? That stuff I had to teach my parents because they came to this country in their 40s and just didn't know the process. They weren't taught it in school. They didn't grow up with it. So I think, especially for people who've been a little bit removed from the process, it's important to get them started with small steps. So I'll tell somebody, find out who your state representative is, find out who your state senator is, and sign up for their newsletter. Go like their Facebook, because once you start seeing the work that they're doing, you'll get a clear idea about what part of government represents what part of your life. That way, when I knock on your door and tell you, Angelica's running to be your state representative, you don't tell me about your sidewalk problem, because at that point you understand that that's a municipal issue. So I think a lot of that comes down to our ability to educate, but do it in a non-condescending way, because we can be in a world where, we feel like we're know-it-alls, and somebody who doesn't know that the pothole is not Stacey Abrams' jurisdiction, we kind of started looking down on them a little bit, and we need to not do that. So being able to educate people on what government does, what each section of government does, and then just giving them the information and just, letting them come to their own conclusions, because if they see that their state representative isn't doing anything about this one problem that they're having when they can, they'll start understanding that this is a race that they need to pay attention to. So I think just trusting people with their instincts and like not insulting their intelligence and just letting them know how to find the information for themselves is a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, though, when you don't want to insult someone's intelligence, what do you say to my friend who just told me the Democrats cheated in the election? Like a person who was formerly a sane human being that literally texts me saying we cheated, where I'm like, I don't want to insult your intelligence. I don't want to cut you off, but I need to try to make you understand like how you sound crazy. Like, what do I say? What do you say to these people?
Don't talk to them.
Right?
Well, when I say don't insult intelligence, I mean, somebody who's willing to learn and not there yet, don't make them feel less than. I have no idea how to deal with people who genuinely think like Joe Biden is like JFK reincarnate or QAnon. I think that's a conversation that's going to take us a very, very long time. I don't know. I think at that point, you just kind of let those people go, right? Because there's a difference between not having enough information to come to a conclusion and just being divorced from reality. And I just don't feel like I'm equipped to handle comments like the election was stolen when, like, how many lawsuits did you guys lose?
Okay, I'm not equipped if you're divorced from reality. That's my answer. Got it. Thank you, Bobby.
And I don't know if like 2 months from now I'm going to just have the most terrific answer to this, but at this point I'm just kind of like, I have other shit to do than try to make people understand that what Fox News is telling them is not true.
I want to hear your thoughts on the comment I made about, or the question I posed about just how to stay engaged and so on and so forth.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to piggyback of what Pallavi was saying. I am a very big advocate for like getting to know your state representative and your state senator. It looks a lot more intimidating than it actually is. It could just be like, hey, can I talk to you for 10, 15 minutes on the phone, and just kind of getting to know them, because I think that once you kind of start establishing, I think this is for both Democrats and Republicans, once you kind of start establishing that connection with your state representatives or your elected officials, really on any level, I think that you can start having those conversations where you do want to continue to keep coming back to the table. You do start, because it's not, it's not these polarizing issues that you just like read about in the news 24/7. Like, I always like to give the number, especially the Georgia General Assembly. Maybe, and like Paul will be like, tell me if you disagree, maybe 5 to 10% that they disagree on bills that like go through. Everything else goes through unanimously. Now, there might be some other issues like taxation, anything to do with money that might have a little bit of nitpicky stuff, but it makes a big difference once you get to know your state representatives, because you can go and have a dialogue with them, even if you disagree with them. And a good bit of them will listen to you, even if you disagree with them. And so I think that kind of opening those channels up will help people stay engaged, because I think once people get to know the General Assembly, you start to realize like, oh, these are the people that are in charge of my kids' education. These are the people who could expand Medicaid for the state and let almost 500,000 people get healthcare insurance. So I think having that kind of realization, and connecting those dots for people, I think that helps kind of keep them engaged. And then it helps them see why elections are so important.
My last question is, I'm a Georgia implant. Last August, I moved from Brooklyn purposely to vote. And when everybody, going into the general election, super nervous. But when it got to be like Wednesday, Thursday, and they said they hadn't counted Fulton County yet, and I was like, oh, we might have this. At what point did you guys know going in? Did you know Monday night we had this? Did you know Wednesday? Were you confident going in that we were going to flip, or did you not? When did you guys know? My question.
Oh man, it's like, what do you call it? Stockholm syndrome. Like, I've been hurt before. So like for me, I was like, I waited until I saw that check mark. Like I was like, oh, I'm not going to get my hopes up. I've been heartbroken before. I've been, tattered before. Once I saw that check mark, I was like, oh, we won this. Like, this is fantastic. Because I think last time Georgia went blue was 1992.
Right.
Yep.
None of us could vote.
Right. And then to watch this, and then I think the Senate for the runoffs, I think maybe like a night or two before, I kind of started feeling, I was like, okay, I think Ossoff and Warnock's got this. They ran such great campaigns, and they just went up against two really flawed candidates. That's what it came down to.
When you own a WNBA team,
was telling them not to go vote.
Right.
Yeah, that when you own a WNBA team and that WNBA team says, "Hey, don't vote for the owner of the WNBA team," that's a clear sign.
Favorite
that maybe
thing.
that's not what you should be voting for. That actually didn't help.
I am petty.
So, leading up to election day, I don't think I slept a whole lot. So the next days, they're just kind of a blur. And I think on Thursday, we decided, my boyfriend and I, we went on a cabin trip with a couple of our friends. We were in Alabama, barely had any signal. And yeah, I know at some point he was just super confident, and I'm not superstitious, but like if you're gonna say a Democrat's gonna win and the check mark hasn't shown up, I expect you to knock on a lot of wood. And he wasn't. I just remember getting like upset at him because he'd just say things like, "We have it," and I'm like, "Knock on some fucking wood." So I think once it was kind of like, it's Fulton that we're kind of looking at now. Not all. We're not DeKalb. Fulton's not DeKalb. There are areas of Fulton, North Fulton, where it's pretty purple. Some areas of Alpharetta kind of red. So because I didn't know where the votes in Fulton were coming in from, I wasn't that confident. Kind of similar to Fal. It's hard to get excited before you see that check mark because there have been so many times where we think we have it and then we don't. And it's happened this year too, right? We lost a whole bunch of state house and state senate races, 49-51. So it's hard to, as soon as you kind of see, okay, November happens, I lost a couple of races, it's hard to get excited about winning the presidency or making, getting our Senate people to a runoff. But the Senate election, my boyfriend, again, 10:30, he was like, as the results were coming in, 10:30, he was like, "You're going to win both." And I'm like, again, knock on some damn wood. It's like all over your house.
Yeah.
But he's the numbers guy. Gotcha. I like to look at actual results.
Yes, good to know that y'all were as stressed as me. Cool. That's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, I was so stressed. I chipped my tooth while grinding it at night.
Oh, no.
Oh, the jaw lock.
I woke up with just like grit in my mouth. I was like, "What is that?" And I realized I was grinding my teeth in my sleep and chipped it.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
That's what happens when you get in too deep. That stress starts to get to you. Well, once again, thank you both so much for being so open, for answering our questions. That is the exact purpose of this podcast, is we want people to be able to ask questions without judgment, to understand what is going on and rip apart those barriers. Every episode, we're going to leave all of you with an action item as well. Our first one is to go check out branch.vote/session. They do a wonderful newsletter every single day breaking down what is going on at the Georgia Assembly, where laws are being made that is going to impact your life for the long term. So go check them out, branch.vote. They do a great job of breaking things down and will be your first step of getting more involved. Pallavi and Falak, thank you again once so much for everything that you do, for your time here, and for everything that you will continue to do. And thank you again for being our first two guests on this podcast.
Of course, this was really fun.
This is a good one. Our first guest, so I'm excited. I think we had a good time. We learned some stuff. Got some glossary words.
Yes.
So I feel good about it.
Yes, they both read a lot of books, you could tell, and I'm very impressed. Falak held a job for 6 years as a comedian. That impresses me a lot.
Thanks.
And what I love is that they gave us a lot of tangible ways where people can get involved easily and understand the representative process that goes on in the state of Georgia.
Yeah. We'll talk about it later, but I definitely learned some stuff. Which I will do every episode. I am 100% sure. But I learned some things about some stuff that I honestly feel like I should know, and we'll talk about that later.
And I got clarification on a lot of stuff that I've just pretended to know because I was too embarrassed to ask.
Boom. That's what this podcast is.
That's it.
Get to the real. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy.
This is from the naturalization test that everyone who becomes a U.S. citizen has to take. It is a list of over 100 questions that my family studied over and over again and memorized, because they ask you 5 of these questions when you go for your test. 2 of the questions that I will pick randomly, and let's see if we know them. The first one is, what is the supreme law of the land?
The supreme law of the land?
Yeah.
The Constitution, right?
That is it. The Constitution.
Oh, I was like, don't kill niggas. I didn't know.
Honestly, that should be the supreme law of the land.
Please don't
the fact that it's not is the problem. You mean to tell me we have to listen to the Constitution if somebody says, please don't kill niggas? They were like, I ain't got to listen to that. That's not the
yeah, we ain't gonna do all that.
That was a weird framing for me.
Yeah,
that's what they frame all these words weird.
To me, the Constitution is a document. So I'm like, I wasn't thinking a document was the answer to that. So that's a trick question. They were.
Yeah.
And so then imagine trying to answer that with English being your 3rd, 4th, or 5th language, right? And having all of that in your mind.
That's like people speak English and it's still their 3rd language.
Yeah. So this is a slightly easier one. What do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution?
A Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
There you go. Bill of Rights.
Cheer.
Bill of Rights. And we'll do one more. I
just want to be clear though before you answer. The only reason why I know this is because I had a very conservative Christian upbringing. And this is the only thing that they were like. They taught you. Yeah, they were like, the Constitution is everything and need to know this stuff. And from
this is what they taught you. I like it. Yeah. I like it. What is one right of freedom or freedom? Let me start that question over. What is one right or freedom from the First Amendment?
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of the press.
The press, yeah.
Freedom of the press, yep.
Freedom to gather, even if you were Klansman.
Freedom of assembly, yes. which I recently learned freedom of assembly takes, now while it is a freedom, it takes permission. And sometimes you got to even like request it, which is kind of weird, but it's exists.
A permit, right?
Yeah, you got to get a permit for it. Yep.
Yeah, you should. If you are gathering in the name of white supremacy, you should have to at least get a permit.
Definitely.
You got to let people know this is what we're doing.
Yeah. It's called the Dead Ain't Go Clause.
They over there.
They over there.
They over there.
They over there at 4 o'clock on Friday.
Yeah.
That's where they at.
Wait, was there one more?
There's two more. One that you just talked about. Why do you know all this stuff, David?
Oh, because conservative Christian schools.
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of religion.
Okay.
And the last one is a little difficult, but it is, in theory, what should have been happening on January 6th instead of what was happening on January 6th.
Shooting people.
Freedom to own slaves.
That's wrong.
No, this is what should have been happening. It's the petition the government. It would have been the appropriate way for them to have that conversation. But of course, people who are going to be insurrecting the government probably.
Yeah, we got to remind white people of these rules because they wrote them.
They done forgot.
I wish somebody would have came up and be like, but petition, where are your petitions? It's in the middle on the 6th.
That's what you would have been asking.
You're supposed to petition. You're doing it all wrong.
And especially
y'all told us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
This does not appear to be a petition.
Right.
Just yelling.
Especially if they're there to uphold the Constitution. Yeah. And then they're breaking 3 of the first freedoms of the First Amendment.
Wow.
Yes.
Put that on a shirt.
Yeah.
I love
Where is your petition?
I love it.
I like it. I like it.
Right.
No, sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say this was fun. I just wanted to dive into what we just experienced as a group with our first guest, what we learned, what we felt about it.
Yeah.
I heard you were learn something.
I learned a lot. So, the concept of the supermajority of one party or the other being able to pass a law without the other party even being involved, because you've got so many representatives on your one side. And a lot of people will counter that and say, well, they have a supermajority because we have more Republicans than we do Democrats. But the reality is that gerrymandering sets things up where even if you have more Democrats than you do Republicans, you can break apart counties to where one party wins versus another party. And I think we need to do a whole nother episode on gerrymandering itself, because that's happening this year with the census going on. But it's so interesting to learn the way that our government is set up, even with all of its checks and balances, still has flaws in it, right? Because I've always talked about how the Constitution is beautiful, but it's the people, right, who misinterpret it. But I think you see a lot of flaws even within the Constitution and the way that our democracy is set up.
Yeah. I was going to say real quick, the thing I learned is that every episode of this podcast will feel like a pop quiz that I did not study for. And I have to be, I'm not going to say I'm going to be prepared for that, like to know what the questions are, but I will be prepared to feel unprepared, if that makes any sense.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wrote down what I learned. I learned that we need to be on the lookout for Medicaid expansion and no excuse absentee ballots. That was a good question to ask, because she told me it was a good question to ask.
She did say that.
I'm feeling myself. You know what I'm saying? I was paying attention and shit.
Yeah. I think anything where we saw, we've seen this throughout history in America, right? When you make some sort of progress, no one just gives up power like, you guys won. Thanks for playing. I'm going to go home and play with my dogs. No, people. I'm saying people who lost power are going to do whatever it takes to regain that power. So when she started talking about the absentee ballot. It's like naturally the response to the massive voter turnout would be, well, we got to stop these people from turning out. And so the fact that's why I think it was such a good question.
Yeah.
Because it led to the understanding that, be on the lookout, because the first thing gonna try to take is your ability to vote via absentee ballot. So that's just like a general principle I learned. The little I know about politics is that people be fighting. And so
people be fighting.
So you got to be aware when people
and
lose.
I'm wearing my shirt from Stacey Abrams' movie And Still I Vote. Right,
Still
where she talks so much about how voting is the one right that you lose if you don't use. Like, how stupid is that, right? That you can literally lose the right. So many voters were purged, right, from the election, especially when she was running, and ended up going to the ballot boxes and be like, oh, I can't vote, right? And so this was a rarity where we allowed the American voice to be heard, and the American voice was blue, right? And so then you look back for the past few years and you're like, so what kind of suppression tactics were they using that we didn't even know about?
Well, yeah, I mean, the suppression tactics are necessary because we've seen, as far as popular vote is concerned, they hadn't won one in a long time. So naturally, you got to figure out, well, like, look, if we can't get all of you, we just got to learn how to get the right one of you.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so that's why it's like, all right, well, then we have to be engaged, and we have to learn about, the tactics they're using to silence people's vote. And like, yeah.
I'm also happy that the suppression tactics have graduated from murder to gerrymandering.
Talk about it.
We could fight. That's something that's tangible that we could actually go to a ballot box with. So that sucks, but I'm also happy that it's not as much.
Right.
murder.
You're almost kind of proud. Like, now you guys are using your heads and not, look at you. Now you're using your heads.
Brute force.
Yeah.
Brute force.
Yeah. What are you, animals? Get it together.
Right.
Some conniving
Who's the
individual. Yeah.
And it is really, I had a friend of mine who told me the history of slavery is the history of the United States, right? And when he first told me that, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, everything that Black people went through is problematic. But the more that I've learned, that's why I have voting rights, right? And then you learn further that the Electoral College, which votes on behalf of the people of the state, which is how they win. They can lose the popular vote, but still win because the Electoral College, that was all set up because of slavery issues as well. And it's like, it's so deeply rooted into here that like my naive brain understood what it meant. But the more I learned, the more I'm like, oh shit, we are intertwined.
Yes. Yeah. Look at the more you know.
The more you know.
That's good. That's the more you know.
Yeah.
That's the podcast. The more you know.
Yeah. That's not a bad way to go.
It's not a bad way to go.
Also the power that the Speaker of the House has, right? And so like David Ralston, who's been, I think, the Speaker of the House for the last 2 sessions, who happens to be a Republican, was in the news a lot because he would move personal dates. So he's a lawyer professionally, and he would claim that he can't come to hearings that he had to go to because he had to do stuff in the House. Right. And so people would hire him for criminal cases. He doesn't have to show up to his hearing because he says, oh, we've got a House meeting here, and delayed major criminal cases for years because of that, using just tactics.
Wow.
Does that mean his people was in jail, or they was probably rich enough to do bail? Bars. But here's the thing.
Heat.
What's his name? Say his dirty name? David.
David Ralston. David Ralston. Why all these people David?
Look, man, I don't know. I'm trying to be the best me I can be.
There
me.
You go.
Yeah.
That's all I can be for me. Yeah, that's crazy. He's been there for a while, they said, right?
Yeah, he's been there for a minute.
Yeah, shut that down. I'm everybody needs to have a time limit, even on the clock.
Yeah.
On a quick clock. I'm not here for these people being that's their only job for 30 years. Do something else. Do something else. Believe in yourself to go conquer another thing. I ain't here doing one thing.
How dare you? You better be like a rapper that turns into an actor, that turns into a mogul. What's wrong with you?
This is America. You better have several jobs like the rest of us.
There you go.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think we did it though.
We did it.
There you go. Yeah.
We did it. Feel good about this. Thank y'all for listening to the podcast.
Yes.
We will have more interesting interviews, conversation, debriefs, information passed and learned. We're gonna keep this going. I'm excited about what we got in store.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Confused Caucus, the Black, Brown, and Blue. You can connect with us on all major social media platforms at Confused Caucus. Please be sure to like, share, and follow. You can also listen to us wherever you find your podcast. Please subscribe to get all the latest episodes, and don't forget to leave us a review. We would like to thank our team, Ashila Javani, Ali Punjani, Chandan Hebal, Lexi Jenkins, Mira Cito, Nathan Owens, and Shaquille Hudda for all their help with this episode, and Shamir Javani and DJ Anis Lee for providing the music for our show. For more information on how to get involved and to keep up with our episodes, please visit our website, confusedcaucus.com.